All right, folks. Thanks for checking out the video. I want to talk today about an interview that ABC News recently conducted with Democrat presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, in this interview, RFK Jr. made some comments that you're not allowed to make about the COVID vaccine and big pharma in general. So I'm going to read an article here and then we'll look at a clip from the interview. So from the New York Post here, Rich Lowry, it says, "Will media censors never quit? ABC's foolish omissions in RFK interview." ABC News did a wide ranging interview with Robert Kennedy Jr. the other day. The ABC reporter asked him a number of challenging questions, notably about the lack of support from his own family for his presidential run. It was interesting stuff and good journalism, having on the heterodox, newly minted presidential candidate, allowing him to make the case for his candidacy and forcing him to think and reflect out loud. Then came the note at the end. ABC, as a matter of, quote, editorial judgment, had left out portions of the interview where Kennedy had expanded on his anti vaccine views, which were briefly discussed. Now, this is not, as a technical matter, censorship. ABC News isn't a government entity and can exercise whatever editorial judgment it pleases. But the spirit of the exercise was in keeping with censorship, and it reflected how the press and social media platforms operated during the height of the pandemic when they were the self appointed arbiters of truth. This is a mistake in editorial judgment for several reasons. One, if you're going to interview RFK Jr., you should let him be RFK Jr. Editing out his opinions on vaccines is a little like doing a pre recorded interview with Bernie Sanders and carefully snipping out the socialism or cutting out Donald Trump's support for building a wall. Kennedy's anti vax perspective is one of his calling cards and of a piece with his larger distrust of authority. Moreover, like it or not, Kennedy's worldview is now inherently newsworthy. He is a presidential candidate. It's true that he isn't going to sweep all before him and win the Democrat nomination. Still, he's polling at a remarkable 20% against an incumbent president who is ideologically compatible with his party and has suffered no major scandals, although one may be brewing over the family influence peddling business. Attention should be paid. Two, the ABC decision shows how nothing has been learned from the pandemic. Whatever inherent deference people felt to public health experts at the outset of COVID should have drastically diminished by the end, given how manipulative many of these authorities were and how disastrous policy mistakes often had their imprimatur. Three, in a free society, we default toward letting people propagate error and rebutting it with better arguments. The opposite reflex, to shut down rather than merely disagree with people we believe are wrong, has led to the lopsided censorship regime created by social media platforms and the phenomenon of people being censored for views that should fall within the parameters of reasonable debate and have often proved correct. Four, as a purely practical question, it's not clear that trying to keep people from hearing disfavored opinions really works. In our age of suspicion and of wildly diverse sources of information, it may only lend a kind of credibility to those views. Fifth, the efficacy and safety of vaccines shouldn't be beyond debate. I'm not a fan of Robert Kennedy Jr. in general or of his views on vaccines in particular, which I consider paranoid and unfounded. All you need to know is that he apparently thinks that Big Pharma forced out Tucker Carlson at Fox News. That said, two things can be true at the same time. The COVID vaccine saved lives and were also oversold. For too long, the orthodox belief was that they kept people from getting COVID, and people who didn't get the jab were a threat to everyone around them. This was the logic behind the COVID mandates that led to the deeply unjust firing of people who, for whatever reason, didn't want to get the shot. Anyone who was fully on board with the dogma should now have at least a touch of modesty about trying to shut down cussedly independent dissenting voices. Whether the old high handedness still prevails will be tested by RFK Jr.'s upstart campaign, and the ABC interview suggests the answer is most definitely yes. Okay, so now I'm going to play a segment of that interview, and you can see for yourself.
You've said in the past that there is a correlation between vaccines leading to autism. That's totally been debunked.
Wait a minute, who debunked it?
We have not seen any kind of scientific connection from the CDC, the World Health Organization, the National Academy of Sciences.
Those organizations are captive agencies, Lindsay.
And so you think they're all in cahoots?
Yeah, they're all captive.
You've discussed the Kennedy family as like any family. There are disagreements.
Yeah, they're all captive.
You've discussed the Kennedy family as like... We should note that during our conversation, Kennedy made false claims about the COVID-19 vaccines. Data shows that the COVID-19 vaccines prevented millions of hospitalizations and deaths from the disease. He also made misleading claims about the relationship between vaccination and autism.
Okay. All right. So now this is a new phenomenon that I've seen in the last few years, where whether it's in a written article or a news presentation, where they will just categorically say, "Oh, well, so and so said this that was false information," or said misleading things. Now, they never used to do that, but they have to keep a tight control on the narrative. So they didn't even show him asking questions about the vaccine, or giving any insight into why he thinks that. Now, it's like a lot of things in life, when you tell people, "Oh, you're not allowed to do this," people are going to want to do it. So when you tell people, "Oh, you're not allowed to hear this because it could be misleading," which, I mean, hello, how many politicians has ABC News had on that have said things that are flat out not true, and they never got called out on it? Hundreds, thousands. But when it comes to things like this, and when it comes to controlling the mainstream leftist narrative, they're going to do everything that they can to do that. So I'm not a big fan of RFK, but I mean, he is right on certain things, and he should be allowed to present his views. So let me know what you all think. And as always, we'll see you on the next one.